Welcome. Good day, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. It's been already 2 intense days here at ChangeNOW. I would like to start off the session with a number. 410 million people. That is 6 times the population of France and 1.2 times the population of the US. Over 410 million people are predicted to be at risk from rising sea levels by 2100. And with this incredible high number in mind, I want to welcome you to this session today. Welcome to the session on a topic of adapting our coastal cities. My name is Steinbrenner. I'm the project lead of the Impact Festival, which takes place in Frankfurt, Germany. And I'm honored to be invited by the ChangeNOW team to host and moderate this session on adapting our coastal cities today. So a warm welcome from my side, and I hope you've had a great time so far. Personally, I've talked to many people over the last 2 days, and yeah, it's a bit of a mix of emotions and discussing and shedding lights on very important but often depressing topics here. But on the other hand, we come together as so many change makers here on site. We have startups and scale-ups providing great solutions. So it's been an emotional roller coaster, but climate anxiety won't get us anywhere. So to say it in Santiago's words, with action comes hope, and with hope comes the capacity to lead the change required to secure a sustainable future for humanity. And with this thought in mind, I would like to get started with our session on adapting our coastal cities. We'll be listening to a keynote, followed by a panel discussion, and closing the session with a fireside chat interview. So it'll be fully packed 1.5 hours, and I would like to dive as deep as possible, and I hope you leave the room with some very concrete examples, ideas, and takeaways in mind, not just being scared by the number I just shared with you. Having said that, I'm delighted to introduce our 2 keynote speakers. First up, we have Hajar Yagkoubi. She's the co-founder of Network 2100, which advocates for youth inclusion in corporate leadership. She's also a former UN youth representative from the Netherlands, where she collected input from young people on human rights, security, and the climate crisis, which she brought up in conversations with prime ministers, legislators, and politicians. So she really showed a true commitment to bridging the gap between generations, fostering a more sustainable future. And with her on stage, we'll have Henk Ovink, who is the Executive Director for the Global Commission on the Economics of Water and a Senior Fellow at the World Resource Institute. Last year, he co-led the 2nd UN Water Conference, which is, by the way, the first since 1977. And he served on the President Obama's Hurricane Sandy Rebuilding Task Force, initiated the National Disaster Resilience and Rebuild by Design competition. Please welcome those 2 on stage, Hajar and Henk.
Wow, great to be here.
Yeah, thanks Mara also for that wonderful introduction, getting us blushing on the stage.
Yeah. Okay, let's see if this
works, right? Yeah.
This works. So when I was asked to do a keynote, I asked Hajar to join me, because talking about water is talking about partnerships, and Hajar not only knows everything about partnerships, but it's also very good to do this together.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we will see in the presentation today, that it's really about making sure that we work together across sectors, across our own interests, our own beliefs, notions of what we think is the right way, and also across generations. Not to call you old, Henk,
yeah,
but still, I am young. But that is something that we really want to embody today. We're going to do that through, with the red thread being water. And maybe I can ask you that, Henk, that question. You're Henk, the water guy. Yeah. But can you maybe, as we start, tell us more about the state of fresh water right now? Is the crisis becoming better? Is it worsening in that sense?
Yeah, I have to say it's getting worse and worse every day. We're losing fresh water at a rate unprecedented, never seen before. Although, you know, this image, we all know, we think the planet is blue. If I vacuum clean this whole planet, it doesn't show up as a Swiss cheese with holes in it. It's still that, and all the water of the planet is this big sphere, but if you really look closely, which probably you can't see, there's like this tiny little blue dot, and that is all the fresh water that we can use, and that is diminishing at a rate unprecedented. Yeah. And that is because we talk about a hydrological cycle. Water is evaporating, coming back, and you see two colors, blue and green. Green water is the often forgotten water that is in our plants, on the moisture, and that's evotransportation in the atmosphere, supercharging that atmosphere and being the source for climate change, not only its impact. And this hydrological cycle is broken. We are changing, humans, by land use planning, deforestation, and everything else, our economic development, the source of fresh water, and we can no longer count on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we see it in disasters across the world. This is 2023 and 2024. I can do 20 of those slides. Every year, these disasters become more extreme and more frequent. And this is the old days, a little bit the me's of the world, white male engineers, although I'm not an engineer, sitting in a room solving a problem, but that won't do the trick now.
Yeah, Houston, we have a problem. I like the quote indeed. Because that's in essence what we need to do, right? It's about redesigning the way in which we look at things. And you know, the best way to do that is to diversify the people that you're doing it with. We need everybody on board because we know that we are poised on the brink of the precipice. And if we don't act, and if we don't include different generations across the board, different people, then we're not going to be able to solve it.
Yeah, Secretary General Guterres was very clear. This is the time, this time where pressures are hard, to be very generous, but also embrace the science. We have to know what's at stake, but we also have to do it together. So a time for science and solidarity, to provoke partnerships that are really driving the change that we so much need.
Yeah, and we got some examples for you to show you what that partnership could look like. If you look at this overly joyed picture here, you can see Henk in the middle, me on the left, and Show Me, she is here in the room. Where is Show Me? There in the back. Some people that are here are also present, but this is one of the examples that we wanted to show you where it's really about creating partnerships, right? So this was a design sprint that we did last May in The Hague. It was for the All Systems Connect Symposium, really focusing on how we need to overbridge and rethink our ways of thinking around WASH. So what we did is that for 3 days, it was a pressure cooker, folks, I can tell you. We got together with young people and intergenerationally, because you were also there with us, Henk, as a mentor, which really helped us to sort of strip away all our beliefs, all our notions that we sort of prejudices, biases that we have, and really get to the core of a clean slate of thinking that we needed to do. We came up with a couple of examples of solutions that we have, but I'll get to that later on in the presentation. If we go to the next one, I have a different example of partnerships, because this is a picture that was taken at the Thai-Myanmar border, and it was specifically a protest against a hydropower project on the Salween River there. This picture was taken in 2017. But this goes to show, right? I mean, the essence of water is that it knows no borders. And this partnership is the embodiment of that. People coming together from different regions, different countries, because our partnerships shouldn't know any borders in that sense as well. So that's another example that we have there. And the next one. This is something that Mara also mentioned in the introduction already, but I am one of the co-founders of an intergenerational network called 2100. And what we really do with 2100 is that we have this network that exists for half out of young people, and the other half of the network consists of executives in boardrooms of, let's say, the top 100 companies in the Netherlands. It's supervisory, it's non-executive, it's executive. But the common denominator here is that everybody that is a part of that group, of the network, has a different vision on how we need to transform our economic system in a way to ensure that we still have a livable planet in 2100. Because the thing is, in our accounting systems, in the way in which we conduct pricing, and many of the economic systems conventions that we have, financial value creation is king, right? We don't look as often at ecological value that we're creating. We don't look as often at social value, human capital that we're creating. And if we do, then very often there are some at the forefront of that transparency in giving what the impacts are, but we also need that transparency and take it to transformation. So if you're disclosing on your broader impacts, how can you actually make sure that you act on it? And you do it through true pricing, you do it through impact accounting, you do it through rethinking and redesigning the ways in which our economic systems are shaped. And that is something that we really try to do, also by bringing these young people in boardrooms to bring that 2100 perspective, because they might still be alive then.
Yeah, so going immediately to that, we have to understand the true value. But right now, we value profits, not value.
Yeah.
There's a business case, in my words, or stupid infrastructure that actually makes our planet worse off. IPCC report, Climate Change and Land, in the middle, actually tells us that over 99% of global investments increase climate change and make us more vulnerable because it destroys everything we value. And that business case is off. It's disconnected from our SDGs, from our Paris Agreement, from our CBD Agreement.
Yeah.
So we have to work on the alternative to overcome this lock-in in the books, in the boardrooms, and in the way we take account, and bypass the stupidity. Because business as usual is lethal. It's not only not enough, it's killing ourselves and our planets and insecuring our future. There is an alternative, though. So this is not the story of trouble only. There is a way where we bypass, and the slide turned from white to black, so I think there's a reason for that, from becoming very non-responsive in the context of the challenges and disasters we faced. Currently, we're constantly reactive. Every day a disaster, every day a response. Politicians around the world, especially also here in Europe, respond to protests instead of that they provoke them with an alternative, a future orientation, something that is proactive, that is leaning on those SDGs and beyond, and really taking a climate agreement serious by putting it into practice. And there comes water. Being the water ambassador for quite a bit and working on water around the world, not being a hydrologist, but a designer and a planner, I found water as a friend because it connects across everything. Water connects every SDG. It's there for health, for the environment, for climate, it's for biodiversity, it's for our cities, our economy, our energy, it's for cooperation, it's for finance and governance, it's for everything. And if we're able to understand that complexity, value it accordingly, and manage it at every scale, we are able to change course.
Yeah. And one thing I am curious about, this is actually not in the presentation, but when we have all these solutions, and you very specifically showed, right, that we know what the issues are, and at the same time we have all these alternative conventions. So we have the SDGs, and we have the COP on biodiversity, and we have the COP on climate, and you were the co-leader of the UN Water Conference, the first one in 46 years. While we have that, there's still this gap, right, that we don't seem to be able to bridge, because the solutions are there and we don't act on it. No, the challenge is that we don't see the alternative because the books are wrong. Leading the Global Commission on the Economics on Water, we value a profit on the short term, while we understand. I think we're in the wrong room here, because you all are agreeing in agreement. So preaching to the choir. Although yesterday somebody said here in this room, we don't need young people in the boardroom. What? We do need young people in the boardroom. We do need to lower, I think, the age of being able to vote, to have that presence, but also to look across sector silos beyond, because it's not happening. Right.
And innovation, design projects, working on alternatives can help. We need to spur that action by presenting alternatives that show that the future is here and now and that it is possible.
Right.
I like how design can help in bringing solutions together that are very comprehensive, cutting across scales, but it's also important that that alternative is provoking the existing system. And in that sense, those alternatives become political because they're ambitious, they're generous in the way that they include everyone, but they're also provocations to what is now wrong, what is now a lock-in. But it's not easy because, and that's what we talked about prior to this talk, how do you come together? How do you bring this diversity of voices together? Because we don't trust each other. Sometimes we hate each other, we kill each other, and figuring out how that multiple voices in one room stick together It's really about building safety and trust in that conversation.
Yeah, and I love this is also what you've included about that, right? That it's so important that we create safe spaces to do that. And well, there's a formal definition that we have on the screen, but if we go to the next slide, this, I said I would come back to this,
right.
but this was a safe space, and
right.
it was because of all the different people that we had. But Henk, not to make you blush on the stage, I know that we didn't plan this, but I do want to take a moment to say that in this entire 3-day sprint process, you were there with us, you came and you sat with us, and there were really heated moments, because you should see it as a sort of 3-day pressure cooker where we really sort of strip away all these previously held notions and beliefs, and we start from ground one when we say, okay, what's the problem? How do we come up with solutions? And there were some pivotal moments where and that I will tell you in a bit. But there were some moments, you were there with us as well, and I asked Shomi, she's there, I asked Valerie, I asked some of the other people here on the screen yesterday through WhatsApp what they remembered about working with you. And the first thing they said is humility is something I've heard. It's being able to listen, it's making space for others, it's genuine curiosity to what the other has to say. And I think that to me, and I really don't want to make you blush and flatter you too much on stage here, but I do truly think you embodied that notion, and I think it gave us so much space to stand in our own courage, because what happened here is that one of the groups, there was an end presentation that we would have in this big room at this conference, right? And it would be filled to the brim with all the people, and for 3 days they had been hyping everyone up and saying, oh, there's these sprint groups, and they will come up with the solution to the issue. And one of the groups, they came to the conclusion the evening before we had to present that we don't have a solution. Shit. I don't know if I can swear bigger words, but we use bigger words. We were like, what are we going to do? Because there's an expectation. People want to see it. And then we thought, okay, we could like easily maybe think of something and then just find something just to present so that we have something and we don't have nothing to say on stage. But what they decided to do in the end is that they got up on stage in a room full of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, and they said, the truth of the matter is, we don't have a solution yet. We're getting there, we're in a process. I know that you all expected it, but we don't have it yet. And we had 10 different alternatives that were semi-good that we could present to you and present as this thing that we came up with, but we're not going to do that because we don't want to add to maladaptation. They realized that one of the issues that we have is that sometimes we are so much fighting to protect our egos and this notion of ourselves that we're unable to admit when we sometimes don't know that we're there yet. And to me, this is rooted in courage, and courage is only able to exist when there are people, honestly, like you, Henk, that provide that space and provide the safeness for others and the warmth and the embracing of others to do that. But it's also what we need nowadays, because to me personally, I think courage is the most important virtue of all the virtues out there. Because without courage, we cannot practice any other virtue consistently. We cannot be consistently kind or consistently just if we don't have the courage to protect it in each and every situation. And I think that's the importance of those safe spaces that we need to create.
Courage and a level of vulnerability.
Yeah.
Acknowledging in this sense the case that we did not have the solution, at the same time a vulnerability that is so open that it's really inviting.
Yeah.
Making sure that in the context of not knowing yet, there is an opportunity of knowing tomorrow. Because it was not the acknowledgement that there was no knowledge or no capacity,
right.
It was not yet. We need more time, we need a broader scope, this pressure cooker did not work for us, we need more.
Yeah.
Working post-Hurricane Sandy in the New York region, because this is a session about coastal cities that need to adapt, there was that courage, but also that understanding that we have to know what is at stake, what went wrong, and what can go right, and how can we provoke that future. Again, I helped and developed and led Rebuild by Design, a sidestep, as this image shows, out of the lock-in of institutional practices and political divides that were so present after Obama's re-election. A process where we literally brought the whole world together, over 500 organizations across 140 neighborhoods in this region, bringing together Occupy Sandy, Governor Christie and the Obama administration, NGOs living on the coast, being vulnerable, and identifying the projects. If you want to know about the projects, buy the book. Sandy was post-disaster, which we often find ourselves, pre-disaster, looking into regions like Asia, identifying hotspots. We came across the opportunity to again create that safe space, and called it water as leverage, water as a catalyst for the change that we're seeking. Building safe spaces out on the streets, bringing community, professionals, innovators together from across the world to work with these communities and not only identify the opportunities, but implement and scale them across this region. This is an example from Chennai where a broken water system was mended with nature-based solutions. Nature-based solutions that empower the neighborhood, empower the community, and in this case, a school for the deaf and blind in Chennai that now have a water system that captures all the stormwater, treats the wastewater and recharges the aquifer, monitored by the kids on the school and owned as a playground for everyone, mitigating also climate change and the heatland effects that come with them. Some things with the slide. So we did that in Semarang too, and also in Kulna, and we're now scaling that up around the world, literally all the way to Europe, and this is in Hamburg. So the alternative is important, that vulnerability and outreach is key, knowing what's at stake, and at the same time we need to scale and replicate, because the alternative now is still less than 1% of global investment. And if that 1 needs to become 2, 4, 16 and a majority, we have to do everything we can. Yeah. Everything we can. It's not easy. There is no silver bullet behind it, but it's a necessity. And water can really help because it's about too much, too little, and polluted across every SDG and everything we value. That's why we brought the world together at the UN Water Conference last year. 10,000 people at the UN talking about water and water innovations that drive health, security, equity, and equality. That conference set a bar, and that bar is what we have to capture. Yeah. In the Anthropocene, our age, water has to be seen as a global common good. And we can only do that if we do that together.
In partnerships, yeah. That's what we try to embody here on stage for you. I mean, Henk and I, we know each other for a little while. I've been able to follow a bit of your journey that you do on water that you've been doing for so much longer, before I was even born. So let's not get into the timelines. But it really is about getting together, and it really is about doing that across generations, across our own interests, our own beliefs, by redesigning, scaling up, reshaping our systems and structures so that they really bring value for all. And I think that that is at the core of it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks you two. You really took the memo seriously on diving deep, going through 70 slides in under 18 minutes. I don't think I've seen that before. We'll be moving on to our panel discussion, and I'm very excited to announce 2 more speakers joining us here on stage for that. First, we'll have Lisa Devignol joining us. She's with the Ocean and Climate Platform, where she's a coordinator for Sea Ties projects, federating a global network of coastal experts and advocating for adaptation solutions for cities faced with sea levels rising across the world. Before, she's worked with the Scottish Government on the development of an energy-efficient framework. Along with Lisa, we have Mathieu Kayser, who's the Deputy Mayor of Biarritz, a city here in France, and he's in charge of environment, natural and agricultural spaces, sanitation, and the protection of the sea. And as the last one, we'll have Henk joining us once again. He's just getting demiked. Welcome on stage, please. Hello, how are you today?
Fine, thank you.
Good. Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you for being here. Thanks for the keynote, Henk. Yeah. Truly a lot of input. I'm sure there's many questions lined up for after our session. Yes, I would like to start with you, Lisa, and have a more like a broader perspective before we dive deeper into some of the topics. Can you just highlight how critical is the impact of climate change on coastal cities, and what are the immediate challenges they're facing yet?
Maybe if I can start maybe by zooming out of the city's space and just maybe remind ourselves what we're talking about when we speak about sea level rise. First of all, sea level rise is a phenomenon that is ongoing. We aren't talking about just trends for the future, but something that we very much observe today. We're actually talking about 20-ish centimeters already that have, from the sea that has risen since the 1900s. That rate of sea level rise is accelerating. In fact, it's doubled during the 20th century. And we are contemplating a potential rise of over 1 meter by 2100 if we don't drastically reduce our greenhouse gases emissions. And I'd like to stress that although it is absolutely, absolutely critical that we manage our greenhouse gases emissions, that we reduce them to limit the extent of sea level rise and, of course, of other impacts of climate change, it's critical. But even if we do that, sea level rise is here to stay. It's such a slow onset phenomenon that it takes a long time to fully manifest. And so we are facing sea level rise for the next couple centuries and perhaps millennia, depending on how well we reduce our greenhouse gases emissions and stop them. So we're really talking about a problem that is both ongoing, but that will continue really far out in the future. And that's why it's absolutely critical to both reinforce our mitigation efforts, but also to adapt both to the effects that we're seeing right now, today, and the effects that will continue to happen and to worsen in the future. And maybe zooming back to cities. So sea level rise is not just about permanent land loss, although that's obviously a thing, but there's other impacts linked to sea level rise. So it contributes to increased flooding, to erosion, to extreme weather events. And so that affects us worldwide on all coastlines. And it's particularly critical given that a quarter of the human population lives on coastlines. But cities are particularly vulnerable to those effects because there are such dense hubs of, well, population for a start, but also infrastructure, activities, whether they're cultural or economics, and everything that we do on the coastline and everything that we need along our coastlines are affected, and cities are on the forefront of those effects. And maybe Mathieu will be able to speak about that better. But the problem is that a lot of us are being a bit disinterested in what happens at sea level, when in fact it is cities that have to deal with pretty much all aspects of their municipal boundaries, and they are not quite there yet. It's actually super complex to adapt to sea level rise because it has impacted so many aspects of our lives, and that's how the Ocean and Climate Lab tries to fit in. And so with the Cities project that we launched over 3 years ago, we federate a network of close to 250 experts of coastal adaptation. These can be mayors, these can be practitioners, scientists, of course, NGOs, a bit of the private sector. We haven't yet had many of them, but we hope they will join. And really what we try to do is collaborate and exchange ideas, solutions, because for once we have the solutions, we know what to do. It's just a matter of doing it.
Yeah, thank you. In that perspective, I would like to dive deeper with you, Mathieu, on that. Can you give us how has the situation changed in Biarritz over the last few years, and what is the perception of change and the climate crisis in Biarritz?
Hello, everyone. In Biarritz, it's pretty specific because we have a lot of infrastructure, like Lisa said, and we made a very active defense system against the sea level rise. So we are now facing stronger and heavier storms. And I don't know if the sea level can be measured already in the city, but since we have really strong infrastructure to protect, we have now we must do something about it. Some other cities choose not to do anything about it and let the sea level rise, and it's a passive defense against sea level rise. But since we have like a Le Hôtel du Palais, which is a palace in the Atlantic, we definitely choose to do something about it. I don't know if I would have choose to do something about it 30 years ago, but now we know that the sea level rise and it's rising faster and faster. I don't know which is the best.
Yeah.
But you can see things in the city, but it's not happening, as fast as we would like to, because people, they don't see every year they're coming to visit. They don't see the level rising. So maybe we need a strong storm or a stronger event to happen. So like it happened in Santa Cruz, which we are related with thanks to Lisa. And so maybe we need a more important impact to make a difference and maybe choose other strategy.
So you think you need a disaster first before the action starts?
Unfortunately, yes.
But can you give us some concrete examples the city has incorporated yet in their measures?
Yeah, we made a really hard work and a really big work on the La Côte des Basques, which is was the main beach in Biarritz. It's a cliff where there are a lot of private houses with a beautiful view. We chose 30 years ago to make a real concrete. It's a lot of concrete. Mm-hmm. It was natural, but it's now all concrete to protect those houses. And this is an example of the active strategy we've planned. Mm-hmm. And we are now trying to protect the other beaches, which are La Grande Plage, which is front of the Hôtel du Palais. And we are definitely facing big issues because we're not going to move the casino, we're not going to move the hotel, we're not going to move anything. And we're facing issues with, we put like sandbanks to protect during the storm, to protect all those infrastructure. But we are now facing big issues because the storm are getting stronger and bigger, but we don't have any technical solution. Mm-hmm. And even if we do something like this, it's not, helping really much because it's a lot of concrete, it's a lot of money, and it's for a city like us, like it's 20,000 people living there, 100,000 coming during the season. But it's a small city, so we don't have we have a really big expectative, but not really much resources. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. You touched upon the point of collaboration. You mentioned Santa Cruz in this example. I would like to hear Henk's opinion on how we can collaborate, maybe also on a higher or international level, having local governments, environmental organizations, and international platforms be strengthened to address the common challenges which are similar in all of these cities. Like, how can we manage to actually work together and share best practices?
Yeah, I think the core what you said is that sharing, that learning and best practices, I think is core to your network and the work, core to many of the networks that work around the world, bringing mayors and the partners in these cities together to learn. Because, as you also said, it's not easy. It's not only sea level rise, but with sea level rise and climate change, we have salt intrusion, coast that is deteriorating. But with that climate change also come environmental issues and biodiversity loss. So a city where everything comes together, literally everything is connected. And that loss on the side of the sea is even compounded with risks that are in the environment. Your cities heat up, while your coast deteriorates. The environmental issues are becoming stronger. You lose the trust of your citizens before you know it, because it eats away on one end and on the other. So figuring out how you bring that together is key. I think across sectors and scales, that is important too, to learn from the best practices that we have around the world. And at the same time, we know when we talk about adaptation, it's different everywhere. When I set up the Water as Leverage initiative in Asia, that is now in Africa and Latin America too, we brought 3 cities together of 3 different scales. Chennai, the largest in India, Semarang, the middle in Indonesia, and Khulna in the Bangladesh Delta. 3 coastal cities that all were in a different phase of development, with a different stage on urban population and with different issues. But every 3 months we brought them together, in this case in Singapore or in another place, to learn from each other, but to also bring expertise from other cities around the world on the challenges that they face, how to overcome them. Not to copy-paste what Biarritz was doing, for instance, but to learn from your experience and bring that to a totally different context. Because we have to learn on the policy level, on the regulations, on the finance, on the decision-making, of course on the projects themselves and how we build with nature and how we ensure that those business cases, as we talked about, are better off. So partnerships and sharing knowledge is key. The other part, the last part to this is that two parts. One, because our books are off and our policies are wrong, it's not enough to learn, but it's also that a network can provoke an existing context. This COP in Dubai, we had the first mayors convening. Mayors go to COPs, but this was officially organized by the president of the COP, bringing mayors to the forefront of climate action, showing what climate action means, but also showing the urgency of the world to act upon climate, that mitigation is taken seriously as much as adaptation. And I think that voice of mayors collectively is key, and the partners they bring is also key. The other part to that is that cities can show that there is an alternative. And we talked about it a little bit in the keynote, but we can talk about it, we talk about it in this whole conference. That alternative is about inspiring networks and coalitions that find themselves in a lock-in, that struggle with overcoming the regulations and policies in place. So I think in cities we can reinvent the future, and that reinvention by innovation, by design, by partnerships is key, showing that alternative can actually provoke the existing system. So the networks help learn, build capacity and trust, create the safety, and at the same time provoke the existing failing conditions that we face across the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lisa, you work with a lot of these actors together, all of these actors Henk just mentioned. And when we look at the different cities, they have very different starting points in terms of their financial means, in terms of their knowledge, their access to knowledge. When it comes to like community engagement and ensuring the social justice of this transition, how can we ensure that the adaptation strategies are inclusive and address all the needs also of the marginalized and more vulnerable populations?
That's an excellent question. I like that. Okay, perhaps, again, little zoom out, but not for long. The reason why, I think the reason behind your question and why it's important to pay specific attention to maybe marginalized communities is that those communities will be affected differently and more strongly than more wealthy communities. Sea level rise, as other climate change impacts, actually worsen social inequalities. So it is critical that we have that in mind to make sure that through the adaptation strategies that we implement, we don't heighten those inequalities, but instead we address them. Obviously, sea level rise comes with many challenges, and not being able to see the sea rising is one of them. Although sea level rise, every year it's about, globally on average, almost 4 millimeters. It doesn't sound like much, but it's actually a lot. And so there's so many issues about maybe mobilizing the population around those discussions, but paying particular attention to those that will be affected the most. And those people aren't just affected the most, they also have lots of ideas that they can contribute. And in planning for the future of a city, the objective really is that everyone is adapted and not just a few, and that we can collectively, in the city that we inhabit, have a vision for our future and be able to realize it. And to do that, we need to have everyone on board. We have to have people take part in the discussion, but not just through a consultation. It's really important to integrate people way before that stage in the conversation. Of course, I'm not implying that this is easy. It's not. But it's a question of priority, and there are means to make sure or to at least encourage the people that you want to get to. That can be very logistical, so making sure that the spaces that you have are suitable, that you have perhaps language translation, interpretation during municipal meetings. That's something that we see in some countries and cities we partner with. It's about making sure that everybody's voice is heard, and that can also take the form of financial retribution. That's something we see particularly in the US. So of course, all of that is difficult on the part of a city. I'm not saying that can happen overnight, but it's also about switching decision-making powers and ensuring that we are collectively on this. Yeah.
Thank you. You just mentioned like financing the transition and finding the financial means to include everyone. Maybe Mathieu, you can give us an example here. Is there any measures or like long-term projects for funding how you fund these adaptation strategies in Biarritz?
Sorry, tell again.
So how can we secure funding for these like large-scale adaptation we need, obviously, in cities like Biarritz?
We would love to be secured about funding. It's really hard for us because we, have to the image earlier showed it really well because we are only answering, to specific event. We are not thinking, and it's happening now because of the debate organized by the French government. We only answering, day by day to a very. There is no strategy behind it for me. Because we are only a small city, and we would love to see what's ahead of us with what money we have to answer the sea level rise. So, sorry for the French government, but we have strong expectative for them because and it's happening. Next week, we have a meeting with the authorities to know and to explain what's our position, what's our needs. Every coastal city is gonna do the same, I hope. So we will, gather together to have a strong strategy together. We don't know what's ahead of us, so we don't know how to answer it now.
Just 1 second, Lisa, then I'll jump to you. You just said you hope that all the other French coastal cities are doing the same. Do you not work together with them or are in communication? Like I said earlier, we don't have all the cities in the Basque Country don't have the same strategy. Biarritz have an active strategy, and our neighbors like Bidar has a no. It's not a no strategy. They choose not to do anything about the water getting in. And if a house is going down, it's going to be happening. So they choose to wait for the disaster. Exactly. It's not for the disaster. It's going to happen, and they don't want to spend too much money because it's a smaller city than Biarritz, and they don't have the money. If the French state doesn't, intervene in this, they don't have the money to do anything. So we don't know we don't know. Yeah. We'll see. But since we we have we talk to each other, but since we don't have the same issues, we won't ask for the same thing. Yeah. So. Okay. Sounds a bit frustrating, to be honest. But yeah, it is. Lisa, you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, super briefly. Thanks, Mathieu, for that reminder that there is not enough money out there, both public but also private. There's not enough investment in coastal adaptation. And I would just like to add that there is not enough money in itself, but the money that is there isn't necessarily directed towards the good projects. Not blaming the seawalls and all that. They are necessary in some places, but there's other options that we have, and it's actually smarter to combine them, to have maybe a bit of nature-based solutions, a bit of elevated infrastructure, a seawall somewhere where it can't be avoided, but also to reconsider in what spaces of the coastline we just can't stay there and we have to just move by a couple meters. We aren't talking about thousands of kilometers, really. And something I would really like to see from financing institutions is really to consider the sustainability of the solutions that they're financing, but also the long-term lifespan of those solutions and strategies. I think that's something that would really incentivize cities to maybe rethink what options they have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can I add on that? I think there are 3 parts to this. One, money in adaptation pays off, but you never see it immediately. So you need patience money, patience funding at scale, because we like to see a profit tomorrow, but there's a value creation, which is totally different. It's a little bit how the books are run. If you invest in adaptation, it adds 1 to 7 or even more to the books, but you will find it somewhere else in your community by more security, natural environments that are better off, reducing heat island effects, and even mitigating climate change. So adaptation pays off, but it takes time, and you see it across sectors. So there's a non-linear direction. Those billions, or trillions we're talking about, will only come out if we invest first millions in the capacity and in their institutions. So you need $1 million to spend $1 billion wisely. So it's not only the large amounts of money, it's also the money to bring networks together, to learn, to focus on research, and really build capacity in those cities, in those communities, to present the alternative. An alternative can only happen when you invest in people. Infrastructure can only happen when you invest in nature. Last, it not only pays off, there's really smart calculations on nature-based solutions that are cheaper, both in the investments, the capital investments, as well as in the operations, the maintenance. The ChangeNOW project we just presented very shortly had 80% carbon reduction, a third of the costs, a third less of the cost of investment, and only half of the cost in maintenance and operation. Those business cases show, in the context of the financial sector, that working on adaptation works and it pays off long term.
Yeah, I think we could talk probably for another hour about financing this transition, and I'm sure those 3 are available for more discussions for everyone who wants to dive deeper into that. Just a really quick wrap up before we're being kicked off stage. Based on this discussion now, what would you say are the key takeaways for policymakers, urban planners, and communities, for everyone in this room you want people to take home to enhance the resilience of coastal cities? Quick 30 seconds answer.
I think network and exchanging good practice could be for a city like us, could be a great way to, enhance our knowledge and do maybe wiser choices.
Thank you.
That's a great one. I was going to go for that one, but no. And the second one for me would be prepared to reconsider the way you inhabit the coastline, the way you operate the coastline, because coastal zones are naturally changing environments. They're always in movements, whether we see it or not. And we're in a time where they're particularly changing, so we have to be open to transforming how we do things. It doesn't mean we're going to lose everything. That's not that at all, but it's important that we're prepared to do that and to do it collectively.
I think dare to present the alternative by these collaborations. Cities can work on these alternatives, showcasing and provoking the existing, both in your cities as well as nationally, is going to be key. So continue to be that provocation, but lead by the examples that you actually can develop by nature and working with the communities. That will show that it's attractive to invest in cities continuously.
Thank you so much. A warm applause for our panelists. I'm sure they're going to be around a little bit longer in case you want to catch up for questions or you add them on LinkedIn. So, we're coming to our last session of this conference on adapting coastal cities, and I'm very excited for the following fireside chat interview I'm going to have. I would love to introduce Martin Powell. His career is defined by pioneering work in sustainability and urban development. He is the head of sustainability of AXA. Hi, Martin. Hi. Oh. It's a little wet here. Okay, I wasn't done with the introduction, but I'll just finish it now that you're here. Yeah, you began your path as an engineer and then transitioned into prominent organizations such as Siemens or the C40 Cities Group. And by being London's deputy mayor for environment, you played a crucial role in shaping policies for one of the world's largest cities. So welcome today.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to understand a little bit better which perspective you're having today, can you tell us a little bit more about your background and what you do at the moment?
Great, thanks. Firstly, this picture was taken a long time ago, so it's a little younger.
You're still looking great.
I've been at AXA almost exactly 1 year. We have a new strategy for our whole sustainability topic, which I'm very excited about. I've been in these roles for many years, and it's been fascinating to see how different companies approach this topic. I did a 4-year term in the mayor's office, as you said, so like Mathieu, a deputy mayor for London, which is why we both still wear ties. I think it's an old habit.
It's not really the dress code here, but...
I worked for Boris Johnson, and I really want to stress I never voted for him. Thank you. And in fact, I never voted for the party either, so another round of applause. Thank you. But what working in local government and in a big city like London teaches you is that in the end, people care about very limited number of things. You know, they care about where they live, you know, their house. They care about how they move around. People care about access to high-quality green space. And after that, people really don't care so much. If you get those 3 things right, you kind of do a good job. So it's very interesting when you look at a big city from the perspective of what people really care about. It really gives you a sense of you know, how you address those problems.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And coming back to your current role working in the insurance industry, what would you say is the role of the insurance industry when it comes to the adaptation of coastal cities to the challenges of climate change and rising sea levels?
So I don't honestly believe that you can fully adapt any city in the world if the insurance industry doesn't actually unlock the potential to do that. Mm. The business cases that you will develop for investing in physical infrastructure to protect the people of your city will come from analysis that the insurance industry will provide. I mean, the whole investment profile of a city is generated from what it costs to make something, to do something, physical infrastructure that protects you from flooding or extreme events. But you have to make the business case for it. And I'll give you a great example. In Shanghai, they raised $30 billion to completely upgrade the water network across the city, and because of the threat of flooding. And it's fascinating if you think about how they will have generated that figure. Will be assessing the cost of not doing it, the cost to all the businesses that would leave Shanghai if they got flooded, to the people that no longer want to live in a place where they can't get insurance or they can't get coverage for where they live, or the transport system is down because of a particular event. So they've in a very mature way, they've calculated that cost, all the externalities associated with it, including poor health. including the effects of flooding on people's well-being, how you can drink fresh water or not, how you breathe clean air or not. All of these things were calculated to come up with that figure. So it's something which I think in Europe we could probably be better at, is assessing all of those externalities to do it.
And for that, you need to put this long-term perspective on. Like Mathieu just said before, that we're always waiting for the disaster to happen rather than having this long-term perspective. Okay, what happens if we don't do this now? So what would you say, like, what are measures that can insurance companies take to support the resilience of these cities?
So resilience comes for me in two parts. One is obviously the physical resilience. You want to protect your city in the best way you can. Not just flood protection, but also, as an industry. Well, actually, my colleagues here in AXA France have just released something they call the Green Guarantee, and it's a really fantastic idea. So if you have an incident and you have to rebuild back your property, that will pay 50% of the contribution to building it back better, with better insulation, with renewable energy, with recycled products, etc. And it's absolutely really fantastic, and it was only released, I think, a couple of weeks ago. After COVID, everybody talked a lot about we have to build back better, all these lessons that we've learned. But we're all back driving, we're all back doing what we did before, So for me, building back better is having something that helps ensure the future of our society. So the physical infrastructure investment is key. But actually, part of our new strategy is really focusing much more on social resilience, social infrastructure, ensuring people's well-being, ensuring that we are protecting the very businesses that serve our cities. And if you think about, let's say, a farmer or a fisherman that ran a business for the last few years, once a year they might get hit by a storm that really impacts their business. And they'll recover from it and they'll go back to work, and that's great. But now the same farmer and the same fisherman's been hitting twice a year. And they can't go back, and they lose their business. But what's worse is that the cities that they provide goods and services to no longer get the fish, the farm products, the ecosystem services that they provide for the city. And unfortunately, this causes increased costs for people. It causes a lack of supply in all sorts of areas. So for us, when you look at adapting our future cities, we have to think about the very businesses, the small and medium enterprises that actually run those cities. I mean, over 80% of Paris is run by small and medium enterprises. And if we're not protecting them from the future risks, then we're really in trouble.
You mentioned various different stakeholder groups now that we need to incorporate to finally start building back better again. How would you say can collaboration between these different actors who sometimes have different end goals, I would say, like how can collaboration between governments, insurance industry, research facilities, and the communities itself work to strengthen this adaptability?
So one of our goals this year is to go much further in bridging understanding. So we really want people to trust information that we provide. We have an amazing research fund, which is part of our sustainability setup. We give a lot of money away every year to leading academic institutions to do research in impacts on cities, impacts on climate change, impacts on social infrastructure, on health. So a whole range of topics. And we want to really better connect this to the sustainability objectives that we are pushing as a company. And we want people to feel that this information they can act on, they can really make a difference on. I think this also helps the governments. I mean, a company like ours, we have a huge footprint here in Paris, but we have also offices in cities all across the world. So so our goal is to work much more closely with those local institutions to ensure that we can provide and really help provide an evidence base for what's next. The other thing we want to do is also help focus on what we see as the really big issues. So I know we talked earlier about climate change mitigation. It's an important topic for us. We have targets in our invested emissions. We have targets in our insured associated emissions. We have targets as a company on our own operation. But actually, where the world needs to start focusing much more is on the climate transition. The big businesses, the big emitters that we can help decarbonize, we can help produce steel in a green way, then you're really reducing the amount of CO2 that we're consuming. So across all of those sectors, particularly the energy sector, we want to have a much bigger role. I mean, I'll give you another example, actually. As a company globally, we have a carbon footprint of a little over 100,000 tons. And it sounds like a lot, but it's really not in the grand scheme of things. We're looking at one project, carbon capture and storage project, which is over a 3-year period is going to capture 60 million tons of CO2. So our efforts should be focused with these energy companies looking to do those kind of projects. And to put 60 million tons in perspective, Paris emits around 20 million tons a year. So 3 times the amount of Paris in just one great storage project is quite a material impact that we want to focus on. And the other piece, of course, is adapting cities to the threats of climate change, which is obviously the topic of this. But we want to also do that by being much closer to our customers. This is the role that we as a company can play, giving them much better advice, giving them a real understanding of how they can protect their business for the future. And those businesses are located in these big cities. So being a really supportive partner to them through that kind of transition, but also helping them protect against that future risk.
You just touched upon solutions to adapt to our changing climate, more on a high-level perspective from climate change. What innovative technologies or approaches are being explored to actually secure these cities? Do you have any examples on that topic for us?
So lots of technology. I mean, we can also start about innovation in the services, products that we look at and provide. We provide things like parametric insurance, which helps protect coral reefs that are just off the shore of many of these coastal cities, with very, very fast responses to protecting them and financing their recovery. As I said, things like the green guarantee, so our own products are really beginning to think much more about how people can improve the resilience for their future. But also, I think our role, both as an investor and an insurer, has to be de-risking some of the new innovative technologies that are out there. There's a huge advancement in the carbon capture and storage technologies. We need to provide the evidence, the risk, and understand the risk of doing those kind of projects. We need to underwrite them to ensure that all the big investors can then really pile all the money in that's needed to do them. So I think innovation comes from our perspective, from how you de-risk future new technology in order to deploy it at scale. And that's so we want to trigger that transformation. We want to be that kind of agent of change for the industry, but also for the cities that we serve.
Touching upon the risk assessment you just mentioned, it's a very complex and interconnected, the nature of climate risk itself. How do you approach this holistic risk management when we have immediate threats, but we also need to have this long-term projection?
So we, as you can imagine, we have lots of models that look at flood risk, that look at risk from extreme events. We have a huge number of models across our businesses. I'm looking at somebody in our Excel business, which do huge amounts of modeling around this topic. Providing that information in advance for people so that the impact of these events is already reduced is something really big we can do to support and help society. If people are aware ahead of the big events, I think it's better than using the bigger event as an excuse to invest or to do the infrastructure that's needed. But I think just generally people, if they have better knowledge in understanding what's coming, what they can do to prepare to get through those events and then potentially improve where they live or where they work, then I think that's the incremental step that will come, and we have a big role in doing that. I know we talked a little bit about oceans. I think Henk talked about oceans as well. Keeping and providing a healthy ocean for coastal cities is really key. The ocean is a huge sink for heat. Unfortunately, we're heating it a little too fast. But if we can using nature-based solutions, if we can really think about how we use the ocean to abate CO2, to sequester it, to store it properly, we can actually buy ourselves a little more time to continue the race to mitigate and reduce the amount of CO2 that we're producing. So we're very, very focused on that. We're a board member of the Ocean Risk and Resilience Alliance, and this is, I was actually on a call last night with them. I think this is also an increasingly important area for coastal cities for the future. A healthy ocean that's providing them with food, that's providing them with, that's providing the planet with an ability to help secure our future and buy us a little bit more time is something that we also want to focus on in the next few years.
Coming back to what you just said on buying more time, I'm still wondering, like, who's buying that time? Like, who's paying for that time? Mathieu said before, it's really hard to secure long-term funding with a long-term perspective on how, like, to keep the ocean safe, to keep the ocean healthy. What's your perspective, I don't know, from either an insurance point of view or also as your previous role as deputy mayor? How can we secure this funding for this large-scale adaptation projects? And what role can either the private sector or the industry sector play?
I mean, one thing we do, we work with our local communities, our local cities, to help them build those business cases. I think from my experience, and I'd be interested in hearing from Mathieu afterwards, but the cities aren't particularly good at providing high-quality evidence to their national governments to secure that kind of funding. I think if they can demonstrate the impact of these events, demonstrate what investment they need to do to overcome it, factor in all those externalities that show the impact on health, the impact on society, I honestly think that more funding would pour into those cities. And we as a big business have a role in helping those cities build those business cases. So I'm really excited to be part of that, and we really want to do that going forward. But it's absolutely key providing that evidence base, convincing people to give you serious investment. You have to show them what the cost of inaction is. And I can also tell you the cost of extreme weather events for the last 20 years has been $16 million an hour. So just hold that number in your head. So if you can just reduce the impact of those events, the impact on society, by protecting our infrastructure, our people a little bit better, and bring that number down, then all of society will benefit.
When you support these cities in gathering the evidence and the data, do you feel like the cities do work together already, or do you enhance them to work together?
There's lots of great city networks, C40 cities, but there's ICLEI, there's a number where they share best practices. I think cities are pretty good at doing it, helping each other with a carbon inventory, so they really understand where their emissions are coming from. I think developing a similar adaptation protocol where they really understand the risk is possibly a good step that cities can take. I know they're doing it already, but building up that database of knowledge is going to be really key going forward.
Yeah. So interesting to hear from you. I'm sure we could talk another hour on the stage, but unfortunately our time is nearly up. As a last question, based on this discussion today and everything you've heard from the other panelists, what are key takeaways for you you would like to give to policymakers, urban planners, to everyone in this room? What should people take home?
So I hate preaching to people because I'm not in a position to do it. But one thing I've learned is, when I took this role on at AXA, I had a very, very supported management team above me. The company is very committed to this. But for me, is play where you can make a difference. Where we believe we can make a difference is in climate change, transition, in adaptation, in social inclusion, really ensuring people don't get left behind. These are places where, as a business, we can really make an impact, and that's therefore where we focus on. So I think everybody can do their own thing. I have a house which is zero carbon, so in my own personal life, I choose to try and make a difference. I assume many of you are very good recyclers. I'm not so good. I should be better. But really just play where you think you can make a difference and have an impact, and that's really what we're trying to do at AXA.
Thank you so much for all your insights today. Warm applause.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
Nice to see you.
So thank you very much for everyone who stayed for this session. I feel like it was packed with many insights, and I would like to thank all our speakers and panelists for their time. And I would like to invite you all to join us for our Impact Festival. It's at the end of the year in Frankfurt. And with this, I would like to close the stage. Thank you.